Welcome to session 4, which is on the return. It's the end or the conclusion of the mythology. The conclusion of this module, I will post a quiz for those of you that want a little more accountability in the process. Yeah, so you have your readings and you have your what we're calling assignments or exercises or experiments. So each of the weeks I've given you something to reflect on and something to try to sink your teeth into. And you have, some of you are more visual, some of you are more readers, some of you are more experience based. And some of you want a little more structure. So there are quizzes at the end of each modules, and then at the end of the 3 modules, there will be a month period where you can prepare a project to consolidate your learnings. And just like the reading doesn't have page numbers, the project doesn't have too much specificity. It's not for me, it's for you. So you can start thinking about that. Do you want to write an essay? Do you want to paint a painting? Do you want to create a little video for social media? Are you already working on something? So a month after the course is done is a period of integration, and you can drive all your energies into something that is representative or indicative of your learning. And there are not too many parameters on it because it's not for me, it's for you. So I'm just going to prime you for that. It's not, it's optional. And if you do the 3 quizzes and the project, then you'll get a certificate if that's of any importance to you. Again, they're not for any kind of exterior validation. They're just accountability milestones. So then I wanted to just do a little review on the last session before we go into this session. Last session was on the trial and treasure coming together as 2 sides of the same coin. It begs the question also, where are you on your journey? Knowing what the stages are is one thing conceptually, but then working with where you are personally in your story, in your journey is another. So if I were going to just do a annoying bit of spontaneous challenge to you and call your name out online and ask you, where are you in your journey? Would you be prepared to answer? Doreen, here in Bali. What phase? If phase 1, the departure, stage 2, the ordeal, or stage 3, the return, without much narrative around it, do you know where you are? 1, 2, or 3? At the end of the ordeal. End of the ordeal. Okay, this is good. So, Amita, you're amidst the ordeal. Okay. Any of you want to step into the circle of fire? Just raise your hand and come on out. Where are you? Might be good for you to just jump in. Anybody? Mary? Mary on the East Coast?
Yeah, I'm in the midst of the ordeal.
Okay. This is very
And the
interesting.
bottom is totally out. The bottom is totally out.
Can everybody hear that? The bottom has dropped out. That's deep. Oh, Amita here has a myth that she's been sharing with us here in Bali, and it has to do with it's the origin or birth story of the goddess. What's her name? Sedna, which is also she's actually a star that has only recently been rediscovered, right? And there's one part in the myth of Setna where she's desperately holding on to the side of a boat tossed in the waves. So she's overboard and she's holding on to the side of a boat. And I don't know who the wicked people are on the boat, but they smash her little fingers on the side of the boat, don't they? Or they cut them off. They cut them off? Okay, so there's your mythology. How many of you how many of you have been holding on for dear life and some exterior force has smashed your fingers, leaving you? And so she sinks into the depths of the ocean, which is a little bit like, maybe in your seeking out a myth, you've found something similar because it's a little bit like Jonah in the belly of the whale, right? Jonah also sinks to the bottom of the ocean, is gobbled by a sea monster. Okay. And this is Jung. Jung would say that this is in being engorged by the unconscious, that which we don't know. And that little bit of metaphor of the fingers or the grip, God damn it, how many of us are holding on for dear life to an old world or an old way of being or a status quo or a sense of continuity or a sense of comfort or a sense of security or a sense of safety or a sense of togetherness or whatever it might be, a sense of identity, a sense of familiarity, by holding on by a thread. And if it weren't for just circumstance, I think is what this metaphor, at least this juncture of this metaphor, I mean, because if it were up to you, maybe you would hold on for dear life like that, being tossed in the waves. We don't want to let go. And then the world comes and says, damn it, you stubborn. you, damn it, what do I have to do to get through to you? It's not a punishment, you see. It's not a punishment. It's not what is that when it's not judgment day. It's not punishment, it's preparation. Who's preparing you? This is fundamental to the whole exercise of mythology. Is you're not being persecuted, you're not being punished, you're being prepared. You're being prepared for a step in evolution. Who are you being prepared by? Whatever word you like there, that's where it goes. Your own intuition, your own Buddha nature, God, call it universe, whatever you like to put there. Essentially, it's the same thing. Something deep past the bowels of the default program of our legacy and our narrow bandwidth of consciousness and our very rigid ego formation. There's something much greater, much deeper that recognizes we have more to do and more capability within us and has somehow orchestrated, magnified, magnetized, or created the causes and conditions to hasten this because it recognizes it would happen no other way. So Setna drowns in the ocean and her limbs and her fingers become the sea creatures, the dolphins and the other sea creatures. But in a way, what happens is she has to die to one life in order to reclaim her stature as a queen of the underworld, something like that, which is not too far dissimilar from the Persephone and the separation from her mother, Demeter. She too is abducted against her will and dragged asunder into the underworld, where she is tortured in a way, and in a way she has to come undone. How many of you want to come undone? None of us. So that's the solve of the solve et coagula, the dissolution, the death, the dismemberment, which is depicted in the tantric visualizations of whatever deity that you're following. In the initial phase, you're cut up. At least in the Vajrayogini, you're cut up, you're dissected, and every body part and every organ is cast into a cauldron, and you're melted down. You're consumed. And it's one thing to say it, and it's another thing to go through it, Mary. To be consumed, to be swallowed whole. The bottom has given out. You're in free fall. It's a test of faith. What's the test of faith? The faith, and this is where Jonah doesn't believe. He needs something like this to call out of him the conviction. The test of faith is that this is not an end for you. This is not a stagnant death. This is a portal through to a new life. And as we were talking in the small group after class with Amita, like, this is no small endeavor in real time. This can take months, if not years. But slowly there is the dawning of a deeper knowing that this is not the end, but the dawn of a new beginning. And with each little ray that comes through, there is more capacity to surrender and not buttress and resist and hold on. I can go through that dark night. In a way, if I pause. Sabina, are you able to see people stuck in the bardo? Yeah, okay. So I just let somebody in, so I don't know what you're getting on your end. Um, uh, the bardo, yes. If you're in a bardo, then we're all in a bardo. Collectively, we're in that period, that bardo, deaths between death and bardo, somewhere in there collectively. And then you personally are on a different trajectory, but you also might be aligned with the collective. So it's like a double whammy. It's your personal life is going through free fall, and then the collective is going through free fall. Fortunately, you're in the crucible with 20, 30, 40, 50 other people. And by the way, the Geshe Tenzo's Open knows that we're doing this, and then there's, your own personal teachers know that you're doing this, and the priestess of Panuli-san knows that we're doing this, and the spirits here in Bali, and as much as possible try to remember that we no longer live in that disenchanted world that Rick Tarnas describes in his book Psyche and Cosmos and Psyche, that world of microparticles that have been objectified by the right brain of reason to the detriment of the rest of the multi-spectrum reality that we inhabit. It's not dead minerals out there in the universe. It's vibrancy that connects all of us, though it may be invisible. We are awakening the third eye to recognize we're not alone. Anybody want to step into the crucible that is in, or the ring of fire, the hot seat? Let's call it the hot seat. Any of you out there? Here's a question. How many of you know what your dragon is by name? Go ahead, Keith. One word. Keith, one word.
Yeah.
Death. Okay, anybody else? The dragon by name. That's what you fear most. It's not enough to just say fear because it's too general. It's too broad. If you're facing your trial, you are in that second stage. Try to look even deeper into the fear, and there you'll have something much more personal. Fear of what is another way of reframing this. What are you afraid of? I mean, we can all identify with the fear. We don't all share the same exact fear. Do you follow? The closer you can get to what is yours, as Dan Siegel says, once you name it, you can tame it. Tame the dragon by understanding exactly what it is that you fear most. In my own case, it's rejection. Okay, the anger, that the hostility and the anger of my early childhood environment had left me hyper vigilant and sensitized to keeping everybody happy. It's a survival mechanism of a young, impressionable creature to make sure that to be compliant and to be nice and to be ultra good and to cross every T and dot every I so as not to disappoint anybody, because the tirade and the anger was terrifying. So then, if you're anything like me, your adaptation, your survival mechanism becomes over time, not only does it become unconscious and default, but it becomes actually probably to some degree successful, robust. What I mean by that is that, if you use it over and over and over again, it becomes second nature, but it also gains momentum, which is why some of us can go through life reliant on these coping mechanisms for so long because they actually work. I got pretty good at pleasing people. I got pretty good at reading the room in such a way and putting in so much effort into creating the causes and conditions for them to be happy with me. But no one was calculating the cost. Of living on hypervigilance, on the fuel of hypervigilance. No one was calculating the cost of not being able to get my own needs met when I'm so thoroughly oriented towards the needs of others. And then it's no obvious surprise that I become a therapist. If you get to that point with the dragon and you see that, yes, you're afraid of something, but you have to go deeper, you have to name what it is. For some people, it's not fear of rejection. It's fear of actually being loved. Honestly, that sounds ironic, but it's like the love is there and they can't receive it. And that has a whole mythology. That didn't just arrive out of coincidence. In that moment and the moment can stretch, like I said, months, if not years. In the moment of the confrontation or the taming of the dragon, viscerally there's an energetic, almost like a martial art that has to take place. Most of the energy has been invested in overcompensation. Try to follow me in your own case example. You have the dragon, that which you fear, that which you resist. Then you have your overcompensation, where majority of the time is invested, time, resources, and energy is invested in not coming under the under fire again, not coming into even the vicinity of the dragon. So whatever worst case scenario, whatever word you put there, the dragon is X. And some people raise their hand, they volunteer to come forward. They say, "This is what I'm afraid of." And you get pushed a little bit deeper to refine it, a little bit deeper until something in your body just pops, and you're like, you shake in your boots, you piss in your pants because that's how close you are to this thing. And then you realize how much of your life, and then because of how much of your life, how much of your identity has been marshaled into the architecture of defense so that that thing doesn't befall you again. I mean, if there were horrible egregiances of break in trust in early childhood, then largely your personality is conflict averse. It's 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 not going to put itself in a position to rely on anybody anymore. And maybe that works for you for a long, long time until a point hits where the defense breaks down like the levees at Katrina. You can't hold up your reality anymore. The defenses are weakened. The survival strategy unravels. It happens mostly in midlife after 20 years of putting them into practice. We call it a midlife crisis. We can reframe it as a midlife opportunity. We can say we're actually being led. We're saying the time is now for the rest, the remaining chapter of our life. Now we can relinquish this defense mechanism. If we relinquish the defense mechanism, what happens? You actually get even closer to that which you have been avoiding. And that's the whole point of the myth. That's the whole point of this confrontation with the unconscious and finally this trial. And that's what the Tibetan Book of the Dead is designed to help us do. Keith and myself were afraid of death. Maybe some of you also have had medical conditions that make you brush up on your mortality, or maybe you're getting up there in age. You're seeing how quickly the world is spinning. You're seeing how the sand in the hourglass is quickly dissipating. It's a good exercise for all of us because death is certain and the time of death is uncertain. That's the big D death. The little d death is whatever your dragon is. And part of this process, if you're here at this crossroads, at this juncture in the journey, as hard as it may, as easy as it is to say and as hard as it is to do, is to relinquish the defense. If you can say yes to your worst case of being devoured, then you are liberated from the fear. And the Tibetan Book of the Dead is trying to prepare us for death. It's not trying to prepare us to avoid death. It's trying to help us surrender, knowing that it's not what it seems to be. It's not what it appears. Well, if you use that as a metaphor and you apply it to your dragon, it's not what it appears. For example, if you were abused as a kid and trust was broken, the dragon is not the abuse. The dragon is trusting. The abuse was horrific. There's no way to get around that. There's no way to requalify it. It was what it was. It was horrific. It was unjust. What happened to most of you, or some of you, especially the people that I've been working with, and I know your story, some unfathomable thing befell you a long time ago that should have never happened. And the fact that you're even alive is a miracle, nothing short of it. and it left you hobbling in some way and constructing some semblance of a life that you could survive until now. I call this a demon hunter. It's not running from the demon anymore. It's going to find the demon. Because if you can face that which you're most terrified about, it it no longer has its power over you. But if you run, you give it more power. So for me, for example, small things like opening myself to the disappointments of others without trying to clean up the mess, opening myself to conflict and people angry with me without trying to reconcile necessarily, opening to the fact that people will leave me. They won't like what I have to say. They won't like my boundary. They won't like my request for asking for something. People usually like you when you're easygoing. People don't like you when you turn around after 25 years and say, I actually need something from you. That catches them off guard. Or you say, actually, that doesn't work for me. I can't do that for you anymore. That catches them off guard. Actually, it makes them a little angry. This is the principle from homeopathy that a little bit of the poison is your medicine. So in my case, anger overwhelmed me. Particularly my mother's anger was intolerable because it was so vast and so consistent and so unsuspecting, irrational. It had, I mean, think about a young child trying to do cartwheels around the house to figure out how it could cut off anger at the pass, monitoring every situation and preempting every situation about how it could minimize the probabilities. But that's all based on reason. What if the anger is unreasonable and irrational and unpredictable and has nothing to do with you? So some of the homeopathic remedy is just to let some of the anger arise, let people be angry, let them be upset, let them be disappointed. Not to fabricate it, but inevitably it happens. We disappoint each other all the time. There's conflict amongst us all the time. Sometimes it's because you do something, and other times it's not. And there's nothing you can do about it. We call these landmines. Sometimes we call them triggers. And I'm not saying that this is on equivalent with Keith's fear of the big D death. What I'm saying is, though, if you know what your dragon is, then inevitably during the course of the day to day, you will get closer to the dragon and then you have an opportunity. Allow it to play out and see that you can survive. Now, surviving that may require some resource or tool that you didn't have a long time ago. And again, this is more of a generalization. So you have to find your specific, you have to find your personal way through this. Sometimes this comes down to just being a mammal and that we have a real need for connection. And that connection can be internal. It can be like an internal resource you now have that you didn't have when you were a kid. Sometimes it's external. Now you have support. You have, even if it's not physical support, someone with you there in the immediate moment. In your mind, you have psychic support because you've cultivated Sangha, you've cultivated Guru devotion, you've cultivated um, connection with the celestial beings, the spirit guides, whatever it might be. Even if it's just one little ounce of conviction or confidence in yourself while you face the rejection, while you face the insult, while you face the disappointment, while you face the fire of anger, whatever it might be, the fear of abandonment, the fear of being loved, the fear of being engulfed, the fear of being separated. There's so many variations. As you open to that rather than resist it, there is a tiny little pearl that allows you to do it, that allows you to do it now where you once couldn't. That's your treasure. That's the dawn of your treasure. That's the acorn. And everything works in reinforcement contingencies. The reason that we're so dissociated, the reason that we're so hypervigilant, the reason that we're so primed to take care of others or so primed to distance ourselves from others late in life is because it was once an impact and then it got reinforced over and over and over and over again. We kept calling in the same kind of people. We kept putting ourselves in the same kind of situation for what's called replication. And then it looks just like we're a victim in a reoccurring story, can never escape it. No, the unconscious has put us in there again and again and again so that we can master it finally. It works on reinforcement in the sense that maybe the first time all you can say is one word. You can only say no once to someone when you've always said yes, just a small example. You find the courage or the alignment or the conviction. See, these are the qualitative, these are the qualities of what Campbell was calling about the treasure. The qualities of the treasure are potentialities inside of us. They get unearthed the closer we are to the dragon because the dragon itself is the flip side of this potentiality. If you can only eke out one little boundary or one little word or one little, one little iota becomes the seed and you reinforce it again and again, it becomes easier to do. And as within, so without. Inevitably, what happens is actually more of these people show up. Actually, that's a very ironic situation, is that the closer you get to reclaiming or claiming your treasure, it's just like summiting the mountain at the very end of the trial up. It gets harder and harder and harder because there's purification happening. So if you're in the ordeal right now and you've been swimming or free falling and it's as hard as it has ever been, it means you're fucking close. Breakdown is just a step away from breakthrough. So if it's the ability to ask for help or the ability to take in love or the ability to find solidarity or the sense of confidence to set a boundary or the sense of competence or communication to ask for help or whatever that thing might be, whatever that quality might be, there are plenty of opportunities emerging to cultivate it. And it starts to reinforce itself. And maybe there are the waves of the onslaught of Mara is the depiction in the Buddha's life story. Before the dawning of awakening, there are the challenges of Mara. And there are at least three hordes of armies of Mara that come through. But just before the summit, there's this even greater challenge. And if you can accept death, if you can accept rejection, if you can accept being a failure, if you can accept being a disappointment, or the inverse, accept being lovable, if that's your greatest fear, then the power that has been invested in the dragon becomes your alchemy, your gold, and your elixir. And here's the crossover to the return now. Now we're in the third phase. Is normally that's just a taste. You don't get it all at once. Just surprising because the metaphors seem like there's a victorious claiming of the sword from the stone. It seems like a monumental moment in time, but it's a symbol. In reality, reaching the summit is only half the story. And as many of you know, far more climbers die on the way down than on the ascent, which is a way of saying the return is harder than the departure. And this is where Disney has failed us because Disney it glorifies the front end and the accomplishment and doesn't, and usually shortens or it doesn't depict, unless it's a trilogy like Lord of the Rings, the coming home is usually shortchanged. So we get this idea that there's a glorious like triumph, and then the story is over largely. You claim the sword and you come back a king or queen. And it's not like that. So the remaining steps on the return journey are designed for integration. So if you've done psychedelics, for example, a lot of these metaphors are inherent in the medicine journey. You have the disillusion phase, then you have a confrontation with the shadow, which may be some part of your psyche that you have repressed. If you've done a lot of ceremony or you have a lot of good karma, maybe you go through very quickly through that phase, and then you have a revelation. You have a very deep claiming of some deep sense of yourself or vision of the world or capacity that arises or gets unearthed. But that again, you get a lot of these stories, but I think the preponderance of the medicine journey is that it's a rough going. It's not easy to digest. And then there's a lengthy return. So whatever it is that you saw isn't quite yours yet. You haven't made it totally your own. It hasn't been embodied, let's say. It hasn't been road tested. That's another way of putting it. So if it's a quality or a competency, say it's confidence, or say it's the ability to trust again. So say there was a breach in trust that left you alienated and independent, and that worked for a while, and you realize you're a social creature and you need other people, and life gets too hard on your own, and then you break down, and then you realize that half your life has been about running away. And then you see your dragon. You see your dragon as fear of trust. And then you recognize what didn't happen in childhood was that you weren't surrounded by anybody that was reliable. And now you have some semblance of discernment. You can see that some people are actually more reliable, and this gross generalization that no one's reliable has actually harmed you. You find one other person, even if it's just your therapist at first, as an incubator. You get vulnerable and you road test what it's like to rely, and you find over and over again that the rapport holds, the bond holds. You survive with your partner, your collaborator, your co-regulator. And that can take months and months and months, if not years. And so whatever was on the flip side, whatever treasure was on the flip side of the dragon takes just as long a return journey to internalize. And so all the challenges that you face on the other side of coming down the mountain are equally there, like the challenges up the mountain, except here, instead of preparing you, now we're talking about integration. So we're talking about preparation and integration. Challenges on the front end on your way to in the labyrinth to meet the Minotaur. All the challenges there, the test enemies and allies are there to prepare you. They're not there to punish you. Then once you face the dragon and you relinquish your default mechanism of defense and you actually allow whatever it is, you volunteer. So this is the thing. It has to be volunteer. It has to be volunteer. Otherwise, it's re-trauma. At the moment of the ordeal, if it's not volunteer, if it's not by volition that you relinquish your defense, inevitably you will re-traumatize yourself. I hope that's clear without much further explanation. In therapy, this is called exposure. Say you had a car crash. The world narrowed. You said never again. You signed what I call a soul contract. No more cars. You now ride the world. You ride around in the world in a bicycle. Well, you can get around in a bicycle, but the limits and range of your capability to live openly is severely curtailed as a result of that pain avoidance mechanism. So then you realize I actually have to face my dragon, the fear of being in another car crash, the fear of collision, the fear of dismemberment, the fear of the pain and the agony of whatever it was, separation. So how do you get there? You say I'm going to volunteer to put myself in the way where there could be another collision, but I'm going to do it skillfully. So now I have a coach. Now I understand my nervous system. Now I understand or even taste the dawning of resilience. Now I have a little bit more capacity to regulate. Now I have a little more capacity to connect. Now I have a little more capacity to communicate. You have these intangible qualities inside of you that are growing as a result of the back end integration now. But you've decided voluntarily to move in to the dark side. That is key. Exposure doesn't work any other way. It's slow, it's systematic, it works your edge, and it's voluntary. And it has all the intangible accoutrements that were missing a long, long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. So some of you are already in this space. You've already tasted what it's like. There is the rays of the dawn of a new day have already come through the darkness. And it's encouraging for those of you on the line that like maybe you're in free fall. You're in the greatest free fall of your life. There are actually other people on this call who have been exactly there and are coming through. And this is why it's important to read mythology, because you don't just end in chapter 12. There are 24 chapters. You will come through. You will come through, Mary. And you will be even greater, a human being, a more capable teacher, a more capable mother, an even better friend, an even more skilled champion of whatever cause pierces your heart. So there are just so we're in the, and sorry, yeah, sorry that there's no visuals. I mean, I can launch the Prezi, but it's like it's 3, 4 bullet points. Even if you just look down at your notepad, it's maybe better. There are a couple variations on the return. And these aren't the sub stages of Campbell. Okay. These are just the variations on the return, the sub stages. You can read about them in both my book and in the Campbell book. But just to give you a flavor, because some of you may be here already or in anticipation, one is called the refusal to return. One is called the conformist return, and the other is called the alchemized return. The refusal to return is just like the refusal to embark. We call the refusal of the call. Do you remember why we refused the call? Think about in your own life. You had that inkling to leave or to embark or to depart, and you didn't. After reclaiming the sword or finding or discovering or tasting the treasure, even the Buddha, even, I mean, there it is. It's, I mean, what more do you need when the Buddha on the three turnings of the night, or the watches of the night, and finally the breakthrough into the nature of reality, the discovering of ultimate reality, the claiming of enlightenment, full and total samyak sambuddhi. He has a moment where he has reluctance to return to the world. He says to himself, well, this thing that I have discovered, which is the elixir of immortality, the deathless. I mean, this is the big D deathless. For those of you that are struggling with the big D, the Buddha's story is about finding the big D deathless, as is the Eleusinian mysteries. He says, no one will understand. I should just remain here under this tree. No one will get it. I'll just chill here. I won't return to the world. So there is this refusal on the tail end, and there are different variations of the refusal. I mean, I can imagine people in a hermitage. I've heard the Dalai Lama say this a couple of times. In fact, I watched one documentary on some of these great lamas or masters that are up there in the hermitage in the caves. They've already spent 20, 25 years in complete isolation, and they're happy there. They're happy with their minds. They've probably survived incredible ordeals initially. Now they have the breakthrough, and they're basking in the radiance of the luminance of their nature of mind. And they have a cup of tea, and they have their morning routine, and they have no children, they have no responsibility, and they're free to enjoy the vista. And I like to tell them, yeah, have two of my kids for a day. I mean, Emily left me for a trip from Australia. I had my kids for 2 weeks for the first time. They're almost 10. For the first time, I was with my kids alone for 2 weeks. And then would you like to see what that Dr. Neale is like? Uh, how capable and competent do you think that Dr. Neale is? Yeah, I'm sure some of these guys actually feel they could probably spend the rest of their days in the luminance. And then the Dalai Lama, Dalai Lama comes and sends a message or pays a visit and says, "Hey, I'm really sorry. It's time to come home. You're needed. Please come back for the benefit of sentient beings who are all twisted and tormented in the net of samsara. You're not done, and we need you." So there's some variation of the refusal. No, I can't. No, no one would understand. No one would benefit. It's, no, I can't. I can't. I still have more practice to do. Whatever it is, whatever it is. I'm looking at Emily, who's now a nun. She's, there'll be no end to the practices that you can do, and then you'll have to understand one thing: what are those practices for, if not to go, even if you don't feel completely ready? For service. They're all a practice for service, which is the hallmark of the return, because the idea is that the treasure is not for you alone. In fact, you can't just enjoy the treasure alone. You can enjoy the treasure alone. You can enjoy your victory, but it's temporary, momentary. The full arc of the hero's journey means that the treasure isn't fully actualized and internalized unless it has a recipient to share it with. And this is what some of the criticisms of Campbell's hero's myth is, that it's too individualistic, and some of the current zeitgeist, we're in a pendulum swing societally, politically, where we're much more oriented towards the collective. And so Joseph Campbell's hero's journey is just getting shat upon because it seems irrelevant, too much of a male dominated, masculine, patriarchal hero myth for the individual. But that's a very poor and simplistic and superficial reading of it. Women go through this process. It's a different variant, and they're far more communal, and their treasure is usually far more relational. But inevitably, it's an individual victory that is only fully actualized when it comes around to roost in the collective. And so there is actually a nice balance between the individual and the collective in the myth. It's a personal journey for the collective. It's a personal claiming of a personal elixir that becomes a boon for the collective. So what does the conformist return look like? You may discover something on your journey, and you may begin to exercise it, and you may begin to metabolize it, and you may begin to integrate it as part of your being. And inevitably that gets road tested in your relationality in the world, in the marketplace, with your family and with your colleagues and with your peers and with society at large. And there is an undercurrent or a force in which the pressure of the collective wants a different boon from you. They don't want exactly what you've discovered. They want something different from you. I have a story in the book Return with Elixir towards the end that illustrates this. I'll let you read that. It's like the boon that you discover is not wanted by your party, by your community, by your civilization. And so what you do is that you undermine your own gift and you try to accommodate the larger collective because you so desperately want to return home. So the gift that you've worked so hard is inevitably lost because of the pressure of the civilization or of the party or the community or the family. Because we are matrix beings, we're family systems beings. We are inevitably matrixed. As though there's a tension between what is good for you and what is good for the collective. In the refusal, you're holding on to what's good for you and you're not worried or not you're not bothered or not that interested or not aligned with the collective. You want to stay basking or radiant in what you've discovered. In the conformist, you want to get back and there's no red carpet for you. There's no what's that called? What when the oh there's no victory parade for the returning soldiers. And so this is hard. This is really hard. What it's asking us to balance the needs of the individual with the needs of the collective. It's saying that you can't fully actualize your treasure until you find a skillful means to make it relevant to others. And so it's asking for another layer. It's another challenge, but it's a return home challenge. It was already hard enough to depart. It was already hard enough to go through the ordeal. Then on the tail end, you have to find a way to make it relatable, whatever it is that's inside of you. Otherwise, it's not a full completion. I mean, it's true you can enjoy it on your own, but it's not a full completion. At least from this archetype, this heroic journey archetype, it's not a full completion until you find a way to make it relevant, accessible, even if it's just to one person. The other day I was on Instagram following a young guy, 25 years old, who just started a new account because he got a cancer diagnosis. And like at the beginning of the story, he's young and vibrant and he looks very healthy and filled with inspiration. And he's like, I'm going to beat this. And he's got a lot of bravado. And then you go through the reels and you go through the story and you see his descent into hell, all the naivety he had about what his body would do and how it would respond to chemo and his family support and his resources. And he's got this and all of that shit until he's like nearly on his deathbed and he's lost a lot of weight and he's lost all his hair and all of the stories that he told himself to prop himself up on the work have failed him. And then slowly he starts to come through to the other side. He's one of the lucky ones, let's say. But his vulnerability and his humility are they're so tender and they're so relatable that people who are undergoing such a similar journey or even not get the benefit of seeing how a human being reorganizes their priorities in the face of inevitable death. So whatever stunning breakthrough this young man has in his journey becomes a gift for other people, even they may not be on that same journey, even if they haven't even confronted death. They're getting the golden fleece. And I believe it translates because of his authenticity. Like he wasn't setting up an account where he was gonna, it's not for fame and fortune. So the alchemist return is someone who goes on that long, and again, Odysseus has 10 years of integration on the way back home to Ithaca. And there are plenty of trials and terrors on the way back home. And each of these, he's exercising and metabolizing and enriching and becoming more, it's dropping from a concept or a bud into a full blown quality, full quality, fully embodied quality, we would say. And the only way that happens is through these, the bays. He washes up on a shore here and he has to fight a dragon or a demon on that shore. And then he has to deal with his loneliness and his opining for his son and his wife. And the world, the universe, his own soul is stretching him so that he's bigger and bolder and more competent and more sincere and knows what he misses, knows what he loves, knows where his priorities are, and knows what his purpose is. So this is, for some of you, this is well in advance. For some of you, it's right on the cusp. For some of you, you've already come through this. You've discovered, like, how are you relaying your story, sharing your gift, making a connection, making it available. It's not so straightforward. It's not Disney. It probably takes a lot of refinement and a lot of trial and error and a lot of testing and a lot of experimentation. But all of that, just like the beginning of the trials, are in service of your growth. Okay. Couple comments. Anybody here? Anybody there?
That there are the tests are a gift. Or you can
I know you can't hear this, so I'll recount the question.
receive them as a gift. But how do you know the difference between a help? So is every challenge that comes up in your life a test? Or are there also situations that really ask you to take a step back or to turn away from? Or is it always receiving?
Oh, that's a great question. So, how do you know if the test is always for your benefit? Is the broader one, and then the more precise or personal is, do you always go towards, how do you know that sometimes it's not better to back off?
Of course, it's my doubt that is asking this question.
Yeah. Okay. So the try to connect everybody, try to connect with, this is probably a very prevalent existential question. Like, it's the same question that was asked in the first class. How do you know which myth to choose? How do you know if this is for your benefit? How do you know if it's going to work out? How do you know if it's good for you? The truth of the matter is, you don't. You don't know before. You don't know before. And the other thing to keep in mind from the most broad perspective is that it's empty. From a Buddhist point of view, it's empty. What does it mean? It means that there's never two options, guys. It's not like that. Life is not like that. I'll give you a case in point. Midlife, you find out your spouse is a complete narcissist. You have two children. It's been torture to live with this person. There is no reconciling. They're not amenable. And you've been struggling because you have a binary situation where you have only two choices. What are they? Stay or go. You're locked into a stay or go. As if you have to flip a coin because only one of them is true. But because it's empty, it's possible that you can stay for the wrong reasons or stay for the right reasons. And the right being the ones that help you grow. You can stay and it can help you grow. If you shift it slightly, it can help you grow, or you can stay and it can further entrench you in whatever codependency you've already managed to become paralyzed within. It's also true because it's empty that you could leave for a healthy reason and grow. And it's also true that you can leave for the wrong reasons. And it could help you reinforce some deep sensibility inside yourself that you'll never find anybody and you'll never work it out with anyone. Everybody's a complete narcissist and there's no point to trying. So there's actually, from a quantum point of view, an infinite array of possibilities in any one crossroad. And the only way to know, so for the broad general answer, for the first question, how do we know? We don't know until we engage in it, and we engage in it with real sensitivity about our personal soul, our path, our soul contracts, what our evolution might look like. If you're a contemplative, thoughtful, reflective person that has accrued a spiritual practice, a community, all of you fit that bill. If you know yourself and you get closer and closer, you will know what is actually best for you in any given moment. You'll kind of know. It won't be easy to take the fall or to make the choice. And if you get there and you really don't know, don't make the choice yet. Use it as an opportunity to discover something deeper about yourself is the point. It's not about making the choice. I'll give you another example. I have another client who had a near-death experience and went through several relationships, reshifted their priority, and found a new relationship. And then they're in midlife and they want to have a child, but their partner doesn't. What's the binary choice? It's the same binary choice. Dr. Neale, can you help me in therapy to determine if I should stay with this partner or should leave because I don't know if she'll ever have kids with me and I really want them. And I say, can you hold off on the larger question of kids or no kids and go into the labyrinth for 3 months? What labyrinth are you talking about? Talking about, can you try to understand what the question means from both perspectives for 3 months and resist the temptation of knowing what the answer is and go on a journey? Well, it turns out that what the journey about having kids and not having kids mean is a whole world underneath the surface that goes into that. You follow? What it means to have a kid and not have a kid for each one of them is a whole world. And if they're truly listening to each other and they're going and they're willing to go on that journey without the need to find or impose an answer, I have to get my partner to agree with me. Think social justice movement or whatever. You have to agree with me. I have to be right. What about why don't people agree? What's going on for them if they like to own guns and you don't? They believe that it's a woman's right to choose, or they believe that life begins at conception and nobody should have the right to kill. If you can suspend the binary choice and go on the deeper journey, what has inevitably happened in just 1 month with this couple is that they've discovered and grown closer to each other in consideration of the momentous backstory each of them have that have arrived, that have led them to the arrival of that conclusion. And if you sense that your partner has dropped the agenda and is now receptive and looking and willing to go on that journey with you, it turns out that this person's spouse or partner was molested as a child. Well, the whole thing makes sense now, doesn't it? And now it's not about having a child or not having a child, leaving or not leaving. Now it's about I've opened this portal to grow closer to this individual in ways that she has never had someone to be available to her. This is mythology. What you set out to discover is rarely what you end up finding. If you have the willingness to stay in that difficult ambiguity and uncertainty and inquire, what is this about for me? What are these choices? Are there more than two choices? What would they mean for me? I mean, somehow we feel more comfortable answering the question than being open to more questions. The fact of the matter is you don't really know. The fact of the matter is maybe backing off might be better for you. But what would you have to know to answer that question? Maybe you have to keep digging. If your knee-jerk response is always to leave, maybe voluntary exposure to staying is somehow useful. But it doesn't mean you end up staying interminably. It just means you exercise the demon of your knee-jerk reactivity. And that can happen on both sides. Maybe you're the person that always gives and always stays, and now you have to exercise what it would be like to have an exit. Maybe you're the person that always accommodates and always listens, and maybe now you have to ask for someone to listen or pay attention to you. There are infinite varieties, and only you know where your growth opportunity is. And there's no way of knowing that at the surface. Are we getting somewhere? Well, what are you processing? What are you digesting from that?
Opening up for when diving deeper, seeing under the first question, looking for, and there are more and more questions coming up, more less answers actually. It can make me doubt myself, and if I am able how to handle this.
So she's saying that as she probes deeper, she's hearing more and more questions and fewer answers. And what that's doing is it's creating even more doubt in herself. Everybody relates? Online, thumbs up? Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm not sure how to interpret that. Is it a sign that I'm in the right direction because it's getting more and more tough? And my doubts are actually just growing and growing and growing. Is that okay, I'm in the right direction? Or is it in some way, it terrifies me because I think, oh my God, this is getting me so much.
Yeah.
I will never be able to handle this.
Yes. Okay. So she's saying the deeper she goes, the more questions come, the more doubt arises. And the more doubt arises, the more she questions herself. It's so overwhelming. How much more can I take? How much more can I take? How do I know if this is actually, how do I know if this amount of distress is actually in my service or not? When do I pull the fucking plug? Where's the line? How do I know where the line is between this is serving me and this is not serving me? How do I know that this amount of distress and uncomfort and ambiguity and uncertainty, when's enough? Because there needs to be a line, right? I mean, for some of us, we don't even have this as a conscious choice. I mean, if you have a lot of trauma, your body's going to dictate for you and you'll become dissociated. Like if you have that much overwhelm, the body as a self-protective mechanism will just make the determination for you. But if you have the capacity to stay with it and it's growing and growing and growing, I mean, I can't answer this. The point is you're building a relationship with your own intuition. And if you're, so what I'm saying is don't worry about the emotions so much. Don't worry about doubt so much. Don't worry about discomfort so much. Don't, what we're trying to do, and don't worry about the calculation as much. What we're trying to do is build in a capacity to trust the intuition. And if you're aligned to build, if you're in it to build or reclaim your intuition about what's right or what's wrong, about how much, about when to leave, where the line is drawn or not. If you're in it for that, if the spirit is in it for that, if you go too far and you fail, quote unquote, you fail, which is your biggest concern, let's say, or you back off too early and you don't grow enough, and that's a failure, right? There are no failures. Try to hear me, guys. There's only a failure in chapter 11 if chapter 11 ends there. Should I stay in Bali? Should I not leave? And should I go? How do I know when to pull the plug and leave Bali and go to Greece or whatever the next calling is? India. How do I know? How do I know when I should leave a partner? How do I know for how long should I stay in my uncomfort zone? How long? It's an experiment. From the point of view of an experiment, there are no failures because everything is a learning lesson. So say you back off too early, quote unquote, too early, which you would never know until retroactively looking at it. You would never know in the moment if it's too early. You would only know in analysis, post-mortem analysis from the back end, right? So if you have the eye of learning, there are no failures, there are only learnings. You can never fail. Because you're just gathering information. You're like, oh, that time, I'm looking back at that time and I probably could have gone a little further. Well, guess what life is going to throw you? Life is going to throw you this until you learn it. Why? Because life is your soul and it wants you to grow. And there's no linear there's no pavement for learning. It's a labyrinth. You're talking about if I bump my head 16 times, how do I know I should just get out of the labyrinth? You can't find your way out of the labyrinth. I'm sorry. The best thing you can do is construct the most open attitude about being in that environment, which means if you go this way and it's a dead end, you learn from it, and you go this way and it's a dead end and you learn from it, and you go this way, and eventually you'll learn. What are we learning? We're learning to reposition the diamond queen of our own intuition front and center. And that doesn't mean the diamond queen is always right. Don't seek perfection or heaven. Just means that you're trusting her enough that actually failure. Like I would ask you, are you the kind of person like me that doesn't like to fail? Yeah. So maybe you'll get an inordinate amount of struggles until you concede that actually your failures are there by design. It's the same thing for people who pray or do, this bullshit stuff, The Secret, where they're asking the universe for like Rolls Royces or whatever. Something deep inside of us will emerge as a result of the struggle. And sometimes the struggle is too much and it actually hurts and you burn yourself on the fire, and then you recoil and you do a recalculation. And now you've got that learning, hopefully. And sometimes you back off too quickly and you didn't get the full stretch, and you think to yourself, I could have stayed in a little longer. But all the way throughout those things, those superficialities or those turning points or those crossroads or those trials, something deeper inside of you is alchemically cooking, which is, in your case, for where you are going and where we are going collectively, the ability to accept failures not as defeat in endpoints, but as doorways, seems to be really critical for you. It's the same thing for someone out there that really needs that certainty. Maybe so many uncertain things are being thrown at you because you're being pounded out until you succumb. Like in Bali here, like it's got a lot more testing for me to do because I'm still holding on that things should fucking work. Well, maybe we're heading into an environment, whether you're in Bali or the United States or Canada or Australia, where we're heading into the demise of civilization, and you need to be prepared for things that don't work with humility and with some amount of tact and with some amount of resourcefulness and why am I so afraid that things don't work? Well, it'll disappoint you. So it goes back to childhood and what I said at the top of the class. If the cable goes out and you get disappointed and you get angry at me that we can't produce, somehow my hypervigilant inner child is constantly seeking an environment of predictability. Well, it's going to show me that time and time and time again until I just say, life is out of my control. And if people are disappointed, despite my best efforts, that's on them. Which I wish I could have said to my parents, my narcissistic father and my borderline mother, your disappointments are on you, not on me. I've tried to be a good kid, and it obviously hasn't been enough. So there's no quick answer. It's so personal at this level. It's so granular and it's so subtle. But something happened in that exchange right there where maybe, you're seeking for your attempt, like take it at a meta level, take a big step back and go, the person that's looking for security, the person that's looking to know, what are they actually fending off? And if we're going to go back to that moment of confronting the dragon and saying that if you can accept your worst case scenario, you are liberated. For me, the worst case scenario is that you're angry and disappointed for me, and I'm free. I'm free from over assuming the responsibility of that experience that you have. I'm free. I'm free to let you be angry with me. I don't have to run around circles around you doing a dance and a jig. And for you, what would it look like to be free to fail and know that that's not an end conclusion or a determination about your character? It's not a final judgment. And then if you see it that way, then the latitude you give yourself in life, it's an incredible sense of breath of fresh air, right? The terrain has suddenly opened up because you can go here and there, and maybe you don't know, and maybe you do. And in a way, underneath it all, in a sense that there's an okayness about it all, rather than a fear and trepidation and doubt and bound up in all those symptoms, which are a constellation of symptoms they're asking you to look even deeper about them. What is the fear? What is the doubt? Oh, it's about, I have to know. Why do you have to know? What happened to you in your childhood where you had to know? And did you ever have the option not to know or not to get it right? Are we on there somewhere there in that territory? Good. Yeah. Yeah. Anybody else? Somebody online want to step into the ring of fire here in Bali? Oh, got one here. Eager Beaver here. Yeah.
To ask, what if we're not sure if we know our biggest dragon?
Yeah. What do we, well, the question is, what if you're not sure about what your biggest dragon is? You're not there yet. You will know when it's time. You will know what it is. Maybe it's still too early. I mean, one of the disadvantages of knowing a model or a map is that, it's the same with the Lam Rim. I mean, most people actually just need to stay with the first stages and they want to rush because they know the whole terrain. They want to rush to the end. They want to go into Tantra. If you know the map, and Geshe Tenzin Zopa will say, no, just do Lam Rim. Same with this map is just because you can see the map and where it goes. Listen, I mean, look online at these faces. Some of you are blacked out right now, but raise your hand if you know what the dragon is. It was a question I asked at the very top. Those people that know is because they're right there at that map. They've been working and facing the dragon. And if you're in the departure, it's not all that clear. You're still working out the trials of like finding a mentor or leaving your comfort zone or dealing with the tests. The tests at the front end are difficult. So they're nowhere in magnitude in difficulty towards the ordeal. But by comparison, you might think that you're in the ordeal and you're just in the test. Just wait till what's coming. Just wait. And then you'll know. Then you will know. Oh, I'm bleeding. Look at that. Right online, I'm bleeding. Mm. 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 I mean, most of us agree that as a civilization, we're in the ordeal. When I talked to John Michael Greer, I mean, the paint picture, I mean, it's not to frighten us, but he said, yes, I mean, we have no idea. We have no idea how bad it can get. And he's not talking about a meteorite hitting and it's a complete calamity. I mean, some way, the slow cook, the slow decline of civilization, we have no idea. I mean, just think about if there is an equivalent or a mirror inverse of the personal in the collective, then what Mary is experiencing as an utter free fall, where just nothing works. Your inner resources fail you completely. What if there's an equivalent of that? It looks like lawlessness. It looks like, the grid goes down. It looks like everything that we take as some semblance of continuity fails us. And I'm sure a lot of people on the line don't think that's ever going to be possible. Like we'll keep ourselves buoyant. Okay, that's a lot for tonight. Let's try to metabolize a little bit as I'm bleeding. Thank you. Okay, just clear your deck wherever you are, whatever stimulation, whatever points of investigation. Just try to return to whatever method you use to switch channels. See if we can just reconnect again with that. The inner child that's at the center of the labyrinth, it's calling us. It wants security. It wants to know. It wants reliability. It wants assurances. And maybe as an adult, we want to do rescue. We want to do the rescue. So rather than reinforce a visualization of some sort of codependent relationship, so see now if you can tolerate, in other words, help your own inner child tolerate the ambiguity, help your child receive the blow of criticism, or receive the indication of their failure. If the failure is what we're trying to stave off, the question is not how do you get better at averting failure and becoming more successful. The question is how do you come to alchemically transform failure? How do you transform people's anger at you so that you're free? So if it's abandonment, it's not it's not it's not hearing the words they're not abandoning you. It's not trying to convince you of an alternative. It's creating presence with that fear. It's creating a connection with that deeper fear. After the class now, see if there's a different message or a more refined message or even a more robust presence that you can connect or convey. And then let's then just shift the orientation now just from your inner child. Now see the collective circumstance we find ourselves in. Just see if you can sit with the collective circumstance in the same way, with the same level of receptivity, openness, deep empathy, vulnerability, acceptance, whatever it might be. Try to remember the chakra. Just when it seems insurmountable across the planet with multiple theaters of war, the ecological situation, the injustice, try to remember the chakra. Try to pray from the point of view of the inner chakra, always being complete, inevitably always being complete. Don't pray from the desperation. Don't pray from the separation. Okay, thank you very much. It's 4 sessions down. Life like life, it goes by very quickly. 2 more modules coming up on April. Some big astrologically significant events are coming our way. So if you think it's bumpy and rough right now, let's stay together. Okay, try to stay in the class and keep doing your inner work. I'll see you all next week. Thank you very much.